Ladies and gentlemen, Ranveer Allahbadia's crass roast has seemingly set on fire the collective conscience of the country, bringing to the spotlight India's $9.76 million content creator economy and regulations, or the lack of it, that governs the system. Does India's digital ecosystem need regulation? That itself opens up the Pandora's box, particularly in the backdrop of several attempts by Prime Minister Modi's government to regulate, which, by the way, it was forced to retract, including the 2024 Broadcasting Services Regulation Bill 2024 for being excessive with government control and allegedly draconian. So what's the way forward? Is Ranveer Allahbadia's vulgar, crass joke supposed to be seen as a one-off? Now remember, a big concern is also around the use of algorithms, because this content isn't defined as adult content and algorithms can easily throw this up on timelines of even minors, children for that matter. So what is the way out? Is it regulation, or is it a stricter implementation of safety features on individual instruments or apparatus? How do countries work their way around this? Let's have a look with one thing in mind, that sensibilities varies across societies and cultures. In fact, social media has pointed out that Ranveer's attempted joke possibly wasn't even his own. In an excerpt from an episode originally shared by the OG crew 2 weeks ago on YouTube, it features a woman named Sammy Walsh and a man named Alan Fung laughing over the exact same joke that Allahbadia repeated on India's Got Latent. Well, we've not been able to verify this independently, but interesting to see how, as social contexts change, so do the attempts and responses. Now, getting back to how really countries look at such regulations, United States regulates broadcast radio, television stations, but OTT platforms are not directly regulated by federal laws. United Kingdom has traditional broadcasters regulated, but limited evolving oversight over OTT services. Australia, government oversees both broadcast and OTT subject to classification safety rules. Japan, of course, has very traditional broadcasting regulations that really play on. OTT platforms mainly focus on copyright or IP rules with very minimum direct regulations for the OTTs. Let's straight go to our panelists at this point to try and understand the various dimensions related to all of this discourse, particularly what's the regulation in India, if at all there is any regulation that moderates, works around content, digital content creators for that matter. I'm being joined at this point by Pavan Duggal, who is a cybersecurity expert. Thank you very much. Good evening. Satyam Surana, who's a lawyer and activist, also a complainant in this particular case. Tehseen Poonawalla, who's a close friend of Ranveer Allahbadia as well as a political analyst. I'm also going to be shortly joined by Uday Mahurkar, who's a founder for Save Culture, Save Bharat Foundation, as well as Anish Gawande, who's a national spokesperson for NCP. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Well, first, let me straight go to you, Pavan Duggal. My very simple question to everybody who is woken up to this, who's quite aghast with what has played out. A very simple question. Is there a regulation in India that regulates social content creators for that matter?
Well, let's begin by stating that India does not have a dedicated law to OTT or platforms or to social media. There's not a single law passed by Parliament in this regard. Having said that, we do need to realize that the central government has come up with the Information Technology Intermediary Guidelines and Digital Media Ethics Code Rules 2021, which have been last updated on 6th of April 2023. Thanks to this updation, they have sought to cover all kinds of digital content creators, including OTT platforms, under these garb of these so-called rules. Now, these platforms are not only required to ensure compliance with Rule 3, which primarily says that they will put in place appropriate terms and conditions and appropriate privacy policies, informing their users that they will not upload content which is pornographic or which is violative of the law prevailing for the time being in force. In addition, the law has also talked of a grievance redressal mechanism in the context of OTT, and self-regulating organizations or self-regulating bodies have been allowed to be formed by the industry. Now the scenario is we have got a couple of these self-regulating bodies, but none of the bodies are effectively functioning in the manner that's so envisaged by the law. Why? Because we're not effectively seeing any decline in content which is unwarranted on OTT. In fact, OTT platform today has got so much of content that potentially a person cannot sit viewing that content with his own parents. And therefore, this so-called self-regulatory mechanism model for the OTT platforms has not necessarily worked. And that's the reason that these episodes like these once again convince us that you need to have a dedicated law in the country on OTT. Somehow everybody on OTT believes we've got a freedom of speech and expression. Little do they realize that their fundamental right to freedom of speech and expression does not mean or does not give them the license to hit people below the belt, license to talk content which is lascivious, which is pornographic, or which appeals to the prurient interests of the people, or which is likely to impact those people who are likely to see, read, or hear the same in a prejudicial mind. So there's an urgent need for a dedicated law. There's a need for effectively enforcing current provisions of the IT rules, and there's a need for giving far more teeth. And these kind of episodes tell us that these are not isolated. These episodes will continue to keep on happening till such time we as a nation stand up for effective regulation of undesirable pornographic content on the online space.
By the way, India is the third largest consumer of porn in the world. That's another fact, even as you are talking about the need for a dedicated law. Even though much of this content is restricted in India, that's also an interesting aspect to look into as we proceed in the show. But before I get in Anish Gawande, as well as Uday Mahorkar, who joins us right now. Good evening, Uday Mahorkar. Thank you very much for joining us. Just allow me some time before I come to both of you. Tehseen Poonawalla, I could literally see you moan under your breath. What was your concern?
Scares me. I woke up this morning. I think what Ranveer Allahbadia said was rubbish. I think it was not funny. I actually called him and told him it's not funny. He regrets it. It's copied. You guys put it up. That made it even worse. But to jail him, FIRs, a lynch mob, one wannabe actor wanting him to be hung, somebody else calling him a terrorist. Like, dude, what's going on? You said we are the third largest consumer of porn in the world. Now listen, if your parents, what was the argument earlier? If your parents can't regulate the child, you expect the government, Mr. Modi, Rahul Gandhi, Arvind Kejriwal ji, Uddhav Thackeray ji to regulate your child because the parents can't do it. So there are several regulations. You have filters for social media, you have parental locks, you can perhaps have a regulation that kids below 16 cannot be on social media without parental consent, like how Australia's got. You can have that. How can you have people being thrown to jail? At bad, it's a bad joke, terrible joke, pathetic joke. But you jail people for that? The line in a bad joke is violence. Freedom of speech ends where violence begins. Did he ask for violence? No, just 1 second. There are several politicians who talk about violence. They never go to jail. You are wanting to jail somebody because, hey, he cracked a bad joke, and therefore the state comes down on him. Violence, sar tan se juda. Goli maro salo ko. That is the line to be drawn. Not this. This is bad content. People won't watch it. It'll throw off. You can't throw people to jail from this.
No, here's the thing, Tehseen. It's bad content. You may agree, and the argument that you're giving that, people will not watch it, it will be thrown off. But the fact is, the way it has created a frenzy around it, for the whatever shock value it has, the algorithms are all automatically going to be putting it off, which will also come up even if you are not subscribing to it. We'll come to that point.
But, while that may be the case, if your kid is below 16, you can have parental lock. If above 16, you're worrying that the algorithms bringing a bad joke to you, you're an adult or above 18.
Okay.
How's that?
We'll
How's
get to that point. We'll get to that point. But let me get in Satyam Surana at this point. I'm getting in Satyam Surana at this point because Tehseen is saying, what is this entire ruckus which is being created? And Satyam Surana is a complainant in this particular case. He's one among the few people who've actually taken the legal recourse. So Satyam Surana, how would you respond to Tehseen Poonawalla, who's saying, what is this entire thing? It's bad content. Let it go off. Don't watch it. What is this policing for things that are worse, but you're going after Ranveer Allahbadia?
Yeah, I say it is not only bad content, it is all trash that is being put out in the society in the name of comedy and entertainment. But from the law's point of view, it is also a criminal act. These acts satisfy the definitions of sections of the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita and section 67 of the IT Act. These are pure criminal acts which deserve no apology.
Hold it. I want to ask you one question, Satyam. Why is this criminal? Why does it satisfy the criminal sections? What do you mean by that?
See, we have a clear criminal law governing the obscenity and vulgarity in India. Like the cybersecurity experts said, we don't have a dedicated law, but we also have the supreme law, that is the Constitution of India, which lays down decency and morality as a reasonable restriction on the freedom of speech. Article 19 says it. So whenever this kind of a violation is made, this is indecent. Making jokes on parents is indecent. Making jokes on sexual relations, on incest is indecent. This is against the social conscience and the social morality of the society that we live in. This is polluting the minds of the younger generation. This content is widely available to people below the age of 18 years.
Here's my
which
question,
is an offense.
Satyam Surana, for whatever argument you have made, and you may have made the right arguments for what you believe, I want to ask you a question. Aren't these arguments true for several other contents that are out on social media? Would you go and file cases against all of them?
Yes,
polluting,
these arguments,
indecent, so and so. I'm sure Ranveer Allahbadia cannot be the only exception. So would you go on then filing cases against all social media content creators like you have mentioned in this case for what you believe to be indecent and inappropriate?
A very valid point, Sneha. We cannot monitor the entire social media ecosystem, but the government owes a duty to at least take action against what has been brought to notice. No society can be free of crime, but at least the crime that has been brought to notice, that is the entire distinction between taking cognizance and not taking cognizance. When a cognizable offense is brought to the notice of the government, it is the duty of the government to take cognizance of it and take action against it. This is a cognizable offense and you need to take action against it when it has been brought to the notice. Unless and until it goes unnoticed, it will be good. But coming to the line of the other social media creators that are creating such vulgar content on social media, definitely we do need a legislation and we need effective implementation of it.
Okay, please. To the viewers of Mirror Now, the lawyer on Mirror Now said that this is a crime under BNS 67. BNS 67
IT Act. IT Act.
A legal provision that criminal... Sir, I request.
I said
BNS
IT
67.
Act.
You then
said
the IT Act and you didn't give the provision.
No,
you didn't give the provision of the IT Act. You made BNS 67. I'd like to play. No, please allow the viewers to judge. Don't interrupt me.
You can rewind and play it. You can rewind and play it. I said it is the IT Act 67 and 67A.
Okay,
I have filed
an FIR. I
filed a complaint against the said sections.
Make your point.
The fact is, somebody's morality could be different from somebody else's morality. For example, somebody may find this conversation immoral, and that could be their sense of morality. Somebody may find a man or woman showing hand skin immoral. Whose morality? Morality has to, at some point, be where violence begins. I cannot beat you up and say you have to cover your hands, or you can't beat me up.
So your argument is you don't like it, don't watch it. But those who don't choose to watch it, but will have to watch it because it comes up on them.
No. So one second. If you're an adult and you don't watch that content, the way algorithms work is, it figures what you're watching. If you're consuming porn, which we are the largest consumer, this thing will come onto your screen. If you're not, if you're watching, for example, only travel shows, 99% of the algorithm will throw up travel shows. That's just the way it works. It's science. Even then, even as an adult, you have restrictions on your various social media handles to put the restrictions of what you don't want. You also have the option of saying, do I like this feed? No, don't show it up again. You can make those choices. You can't put somebody else in jail because something he said may throw up on your social media feed and therefore you may get offended. That is too much of hypothesis. The hypothesis is the reality is violence. If there is violence. Now, one second. Everyone's outraging here. There's a poet who's trying to be a politician. He spoke filth and death for Saif Ali Khan's kid. He didn't use abusive language. How many people outraged on that poet? He wanted death for Saif Ali Khan's little child. He's trying to get into politics.
Okay.
Is that not vulgar?
Okay.
Because he didn't use abusive language.
Okay. Pawan Dugal, very quickly come in. A minute to you, Pawan Dugal. Help us to understand this whole debate between choice and algorithms. Does algorithms really leave you with a choice? Next to Anish Gawande as well as Uday Mahorkar. But first, Pawan Dugal, please.
First and foremost, algorithms don't give you a choice. They thrust information upon you. Number two, the law is very clear. The law does not talk about morality. Section 67 of the IT Act says whoever publishes, transmits, or causes to be published or transmitted in the electronic form any information which is lascivious or which appeals to the prurient interests or the effect of which is to tend to deprave and corrupt the minds of those who, having regard to the relevant circumstances, are likely to see, read, and hear the same. So here there's no issue of morality. Here, the moment I publish, the moment I transmit content which is lascivious, or the effect of which is to tend to deprave and corrupt the minds of those, the offence gets committed under Section 67 of the IT Act. Now, the moment you're making a comment to a participant, asking him about his choices pertaining to sexual behavior of his parents, you're actually touching on a very, very raw nerve. And that being so, such kind of a content could potentially come within the ambit of Section 67. Whether it's moral, whether it's not moral, is not even, the law is not even bothered about that. But ultimately, let's realize it. Because it's getting so much traction, the algorithms are going to pick that up and throw it on your face. So how do you go ahead and protect those people who are not expecting this content to be thrown on their face? And what is the responsibility of the state in this regard? That is a fundamental question. Why there's a need now for the OTT content to be appropriately regulated versus certain common minimum denominators, whether it's of obscenity, whether it's pornography, whether it's some basic sense. Let's not go and over-regulate. OTT is a great platform, but let's do just the regulation of content which is likely to trouble the fabric of the culture and the minds of Indians.
All right. Okay. Now, before I get back to a very important aspect that both Tehseen and you have raised, and that is about the choice versus algorithms, let me just very quickly just sidetrack a bit the very inherent to the discourse that we are having, and that is the attempts to bring in regulations in the past. The last was the 2023 draft bill, and that had a lot of pushback for a lot of reasons, including what they called was government control and the excesses around the government control to be able to regulate content on social media. And that is also clubbing news broadcasters with content creators. So almost people arguing that that's a backdoor entry being given to the government to thwart organizations, groups that they think do not work in their favor. Let me first get in Anish Gawande at this point. Anish Gawande, one big thing that's emerging out of what's happened with Ranveer Allahbadia is this whole argument that doesn't India need a regulation on social content, on digital content? Tehseen says no chance. That's a free choice. Let people decide what they want to consume. How do you look at this, Anish? Because there have been attempts in the past to regulate and it's just fallen flat.
You know, Sneha, firstly, thank you for having me on your show. Let me start off by saying that Section 67 of the IT Act is one of the most ridiculous provisions in any act introduced in the country today.
Yes.
The act says that any lascivious content which has the potential to corrupt or appeals to prurient interests, prurient interest means an attention to too much sex, can be controlled by the government. Who is going to define this? 50 years ago, women wearing shorts would be considered a violation under this act. The very fact that our laws do not have any clarity in them is exactly what we've been speaking against. Nobody is saying that this content should not be regulated, but there needs to be some sensibility in the regulation. When the government of India brought in the broadcasting bill, why did we speak up against it? Because what did it say? That YouTubers, Instagrammers, digital content creators would be classified as broadcasters. What did it say? It said that they should be forced to register and notify the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting. They should set up content evaluation committees at their own cost with government oversight. They should face crippling fines, 50 lakhs for a first violation, 2.5 crores for a repeat violation. And they should have their channel shut down for disturbing public tranquility. Who defines all of these things? Is this how you write a law? Is this how you're going to use the law to shut down any content creator? Is this how you're going to shut down Dhruv Rathi tomorrow? In a country where Ramesh Bidhuri can say the most obscene and filthy things in the Lok Sabha against Danish Ali, in a country where the National Human Rights Commission takes 2 months to recognize that women are being paraded naked and sexually assaulted in Manipur, and in a country where that same Human Rights Commission takes only a few hours to ask YouTube to take down Ranveer Allahbadia's content, are we really debating regulation? The same Himanto Biswa Sarma who said that Ranveer Allahbadia should have a FIR filed against him is the same Himanto Biswa Sarma who not too long ago said that people get cancer because of their previous misdeeds. Should we file an FIR against him too? Can I ask the lawyers on this show to please file an FIR against him, against Ramesh Bidhuri? It's cognizable. I'm bringing it to your interest. It's on national television. Please go ahead and file FIRs.
All right, I'll get to Satyam Surana in a bit. But Uday Mahorkar, please comment at this point. And it's interesting, it's very nice to have you. Thank you for joining us. You were also the former Central Information Commissioner. In fact, you were a former Central Information Commissioner till November 2023. So good to have you. How do you look at the argument that Anish Gawande has put forth?
No, I take a totally different view. You see, what is the content which is being served by OTT platforms? I mean, I'm talking besides Ranveer Allahbadia. There are films showing perversion between daughter-in-law and father-in-law, a teacher-student, Bhabi Devar. These films are coming day in and day out. Are we not supposed to check this content, prevent it? This is an assault on our culture. It is an assault on humanity. There are groups now in even America and the West who are speaking out against this. And Ranveer Allahbadia, I think he was trying to imitate the roast culture of the West, which has no place in our culture. So it's not about law. It is about whether we want to become really a great nation. When Mr. Modi talks about India becoming a Viksit Bharat in 2047, nobody has any doubt that we'll become a great nation, a superpower by 2037. But will India be a culturally pauper nation? That is what we have to address. And such films are coming. There is one Vivo Agrawal who owns Ullu app. The kind of stuff he serves. I mean, you can't see a single film. It is so bad. So basically,
here's the thing, Mr. Uday Mahorkar.
There is dire need to regulate content, to come up with a very strong law. We will punish such content makers. Mind you, the kind of content which is coming, which is being shown in India, only 20%
so here's my
of that
question.
is
So
being
essentially, you are choosing to pick up instances and examples that have obviously gone wrong. You are choosing to do that. You are highlighting examples that you say are completely violative of Indian culture or ethos.
My Save Culture, Save Bharat Foundation has proved that content is the main instigator of the rapists. We got 8 studies with us. Ted Bundy, the biggest rapist killer of America, in 1989, before he was sentenced to death, he gave an interview. He raped 30 women and killed them. He gave an interview that I came to Florida.
Uday Mahorkar, this is a bit extreme. I don't know which journal has this study been published in, so I really will not be able to back the study you're talking about. Because there was one time when some people said it's the clothes that women wear that cause the rape. Some people say the content.
Allow me to speak.
Yes, go ahead, sir. Please, by all means.
There are 7 cases of brother raping sister driven by pornography in the last 4 months. There are 2 cases of father raping daughter after seeing pornography. And there is 1 case in Rajasthan where a man got drunk, saw pornography and raped his own mother. So it is a very serious matter. I'm sorry, we are just debating the law. It is a very serious matter.
Anish Gawande, please respond.
And
Udayji,
where this dirt is coming has to be stopped. And it is coming on it is a women and children rights issue also. Because it is coming on the phone of children. Today, phone is a educational device. It is coming on phone also. Haryana government gave tablets to students.
So Udayji, essentially you're breaking this down and you're saying that there is a social media and digital content that is churning up stuffs which are completely against what you believe is India's culture. And therefore, there needs to be regulation. Anish Gawande, for somebody like Mr. Uday, who believes that the content is absolutely violative of what he believes should be the content on social media and representing India, how would you respond to this?
Majority Indians believe.
You know, Udayji, I agree with you. Udayji, I agree with you. I think today we are facing an incredible crisis in front of all of us. For those of us who have nephews or nieces or children, we know the challenges of keeping this content away from kids. We know the ways in which this content has infiltrated every single space in our lives. But the solution is simply not to ban things. You know, a while ago, the government tried banning websites. Now, unfortunately, it became a bureaucratic endeavor and they reached the first 10 pages of Google search and only managed to ban the first 10 pages. From page 11, they could not ban anything else. What is missing in all of these approaches is the understanding of the scale of the internet. How much will you ban? How much will you regulate? How will you regulate Andrew Tate, who is actually the most vile influencer online right now, who's sitting in America, telling people that women are inferior to men and spreading the most horrendous things about sexual assault? Are you going to fine him in India? How are you going to stop his content from showing up? The one thing that we need to do...
It's a question of will.
No, sir, if you would let me complete for just 1 second. I did let you speak. If you let me complete for just 1 second. The only way to counter this is by educating our children. But for a country obsessed with changing our textbooks, in the last 10 years, we have seen no attempts to actively inform children about the harms of the internet. We've not seen any attempts by the government to tell children about what they're seeing online and how to protect themselves from these harms. So all of this on television and outrage is going to solve nothing, because how much are you really going to ban?
I don't agree with him. I agree that there have to be attempts, to spread awareness by the government, by people in the society, But then you have to close the tap from where it is coming. Otherwise, it is coming on the phone of the children.
How will you close it in the internet? Sir, that's the question.
Sir, how do you plan to
close the internet? How do you plan to close the tap? Because unlike internet, sir, unlike a country which has geographical, physical boundaries, where are the boundaries defined in the social media world and in the internet world? How do you do that?
In Middle East, whatever we are seeing, only 15% of that is coming. In Middle East. In Singapore also it is...
Sir, you can't compare India's... Sir, I believe you would also agree, sir, to compare India's social milieu to that of the Middle East and to propagate a culture which is coming from Middle East is a bit extreme, sir. You can't use that as an example.
Singapore also. Why?
And Singapore is not a democratic country.
Who gets to control what content is vulgar? Who gets to control what content is vulgar? Who gets to control what is Indian culture? 10 years ago, homosexuality was against Indian culture. 20 years ago, women wearing shorts was against Indian culture. 30 years ago, women going to work might have been against Indian culture. 100 years ago, women getting married to somebody of their choice would have been against Indian culture. This definition of morality, once it starts entering the era of regulation, becomes very dangerous, sir. Unless you have an independent authority control, then how are we going to get real regulation?
Sexual perversion between father-in-law and daughter-in-law, brother-in-law and sister-in-law. There is one film by Alt.
Sir, but these are not,
Alt where there is a man who
are not the only things that can be regulated.
Mr. Uday, there is no question of justifying any of this content here. I don't think, Mr. Uday, any panelist who is part of my panel here is going to justify any of that kind of content. The discussion is not about that content. The discussion is about how are you going to bring in a regulation which is not for this form of content. Nobody is saying subscribe to this content, by all means, sir.
No, it has to be regulated. That is what I am saying. How they regulate? How
but
it is
regulation requires
okay, definitions of the
government.
Let me just come in on this. Uday sir says that this should be regulated. I agree with him. Let's have regulations. I agree with him. So does Mr. Gawande agree with him. This particular show was regulated. It was only for a subscriber base. It was a ticketed show. The conditions in it said you had to be an adult. Now, it was a regulated show. Now, any content, even
No,
if
it wasn't an adult show. It wasn't.
it was subscriber, and you have to be above a certain age for subscribing to this.
But-
Yeah, but that's the
That's
regulation.
again it.
So that's it. I'm saying there was a regulation. Now you can have a regulation saying, "Oh, we will not allow a toxic masculinity to be had on podcasts." But as he said, Andrew Tate is doing that in US. It'll be regulated. How are you going to stop it? Japanese porn is consumed very highly in India. How are you going to stop it? What he's talking about, he may be talking about certain OTT channels, which I don't know much about. But I think the way they function is, again, there's a subscription model to those. So if somebody's making that content, people are consuming that content. Again, it comes down to what is regulation. Now, in my opinion, regulation must come in, that line must come in at violence. Sar tan se juda is not free speech. That is violence. This, everything else, Ramesh Biduri's speech, that is evil content. Everything else, the way the internet works is, if you don't like it, it is outrage. People don't watch it. He will, because the way Ranveer functions, he had a certain image. The outrage is, he had an image, he spoke about God, religion, etc., finding the Yeti, finding spiritual gurus, etc. Now his audience is shocked with it. So they may not go. It works on give and take. You can't regulate. How do you ban something on the internet? How do you ban something on the blockchain? Tomorrow you have content on the blockchain. Do you even know what blockchain is? How are you going to block it? Can you block something on the blockchain?
Okay, Mr. Uday, I'm going to come to you before I go back to the other two panelists who have been waiting. Mr. Uday, here's my question to you to add to what Tehseen as well as Anish are saying, and we are trying to really understand the nuances in this. Now, let's look at porn. Because you mentioned incest and incestual relationships, as it were, India is the third highest consumer of porn. But production as well as distribution of porn is illegal in India.
Correct.
Personal consumption is not explicitly banned, but government has blocked over 800 pornographic websites. All of this can be accessed through VPNs.
Correct.
So what are we talking in terms of regulation, sir?
No, technically it is possible. It's a question of will. There has to be will to do it. That will is lacking today.
How?
That is my point. I have been working on this for the last more than 2 years. I have spoken to technical experts. It can be done. How did the government ban TikTok?
How?
Why TikTok is not seen today in India?
TikTok is seen
So
in VPN.
let's not find ways to justify such content. I'm sorry.
Oh God.
There has to be a strong regulation
Mr. Pavan
and
Duggal,
will
let's-
to implement it. Not just regulation. It is about implementation also.
No, but the problem with the strong regulation, Mr. Uday, is the regulations that have happened till now are subject to very excessive government controls. And even definitions
No, I
that have
agree-
been
I agree
extreme
with-
and people have
Anish
questioned the
Gawande,
way
it-
several
I
terms
agree
have
with
been
Anish Gawande,
defined.
it should not be used for political purposes. I think that is what he was hinting at. I fully agree with him. The regulation should not be designed to target political enemies. I agree with him. But we are talking here about
TikTok's
such
available on the
content
darknet.
which can destroy our nation, our culture, our society. And it is affecting, you see, I've been in touch with Christians, I've been in touch with Muslims. There is
Just one
one
line.
issue. This is one issue where today Christians, Hindus, and average Christians, Hindus, and Muslims are one. That we want to save our society. We want to save our family. Muslims say that we make them wear hijab. And the girls are seeing this on their phone. Daughters. So this is one issue
Okay.
which
Can I
can
ask you
unite
one
the
All right, sir. Okay. Tehseen, exactly 15 seconds. I need to go to Satyam Surana after this.
TikTok specifically can be accessed on the darknet. Drugs are available on the darknet. And all of these singers who sing songs about glorifying drugs are campaigning for various political parties and are being glorified. That is more dangerous because your entire population is falling to drug addict. They're actually glorifying drugs and those songs are played on loudsingers. Anything is available via VPN. This is not the Middle East. Middle East has laws which are draconian. So in the Middle East, you cannot go on Twitter or Facebook and say, my government is bad, whether state or central. Those laws then get implemented.
Most importantly,
You can't-
those
They're
are not democratic
democracies.
countries.
In a democracy, you can't. And again, all the TikTok content is on Instagram. Everything. So what you wanted to do, you may have stopped China. The content, everything of TikTok is available on Instagram.
Okay. All right, Satyam Surana, you've been wanting to say something since a while now. Please go ahead.
will respond to Anish Gawande first because he brought in a very political question in this. I may clarify, I am not a political person. I will choose what I file an FIR against. I will choose. I stand for morality. I stand for decency. I stand for Indian culture. The second thing that I want to put on is just because the sheer magnitude of crime is so much does not mean you stop regulating the crime.
You have your freedom, but you can't say Gawande because he's a political spokesperson. He said a political point. He spoke
this issue was never
about
political.
a leader who made a very crass statement.
I am totally in. I am
He
totally
brought in the
for
context of a
legislation
leader
against political
who spoke about an
censorship.
extremely crass statement for a colleague, his colleague. If I can put it in such a simple word as it were. So
That
it wasn't
was a
any
statement made
political
on the floor of
insinuations
the
as
House,
such. He was
and that
asking
has
a very
no
straight
recourse.
question.
The statement which Anish Gawande pointed out was a statement made on the floor of the House, and even the Supreme Court cannot take action against it, Sneha. So the second point that I want to make it, just because some things are so much in magnitude does not mean you stop regulating them. Just tomorrow, if the number of murders increase and if everybody tries to do a murder, you cannot just say that we'll stop making laws against murder. So just because you have pornography available everywhere, you cannot say we'll stop regulating pornography. Just because child pornography is still available on dark web, you cannot say that we'll stop making laws against child pornography. There needs to be a government who will work for regulating things that are against the morality. We come from a culture where we start every good function with Matru Deva and Pitru Deva Bhava. We do not belong to a culture where a father rapes his 4-year-old daughter. We do not belong to that culture. So speaking of incest in such a culture is immorality,
but
is
unfortunately, it's very much part of our culture.
Yeah, but
I mean, I may very politely disagree with you because that's not our culture. But that's as much a crime in our culture across the states for that matter, where incest and rape is really part of our culture. I mean, it's really part of our Indian society, sir.
I want to come in here. I want to come in here very pointedly. Right? To begin with, Satyam, I think that was not targeted very directly at you, but rather as a general instance, right, of the way in which these laws are used and where they're used. We are also the land of ahimsa. But as journalist Path MN recently pointed out, we've seen a 75% increase in hate speech instances in India over the last year in 2024. 80% of those have occurred in BJP-ruled states. Now, the same law that you're talking about has been used to target people for morality, for indecency, for all sorts of things, but not to shut down instances of hate speech. So the selective application of the law is the problem. The definition of the law does not explicitly say that incest should be prohibited or depictions of certain categories of speech should be prohibited. The law is deliberately left vague to ensure that the government can use it towards political ends. We have supported a more robust framework for regulating content. We have said that we must have better defamation laws because they're currently being misused. But under this government, and unfortunately under various governments, and I won't take only this government to task over here, unfortunately the reality is, just as Tehseen said, the minute you introduce regulation, you end up becoming a state that regulates everything. You know, too much power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Okay, all right. I think we're totally out of time, but Pawan Dugal, I do want to go to you at this point. Pawan Dugal, to parents who are watching in India, to parents who are watching and who possibly would be very shocked with what they heard in news, let's face the fact, a lot of middle-aged parents and even grandparents possibly who are much of the time with the grandchildren at their homes with parents working out will be absolutely aghast with what they saw on their news channels, and immediately they would be wondering what to do with our children, what to do with the small children at home. What would you tell them?
I'll only tell them the winds of change are blowing. Let's go for more capacity building. Let's sensitize the children that there's all kind of muck and all kinds of undesirable content. Let's empower them so that they can be in a better position to determine what kind of a content they would want to access or consume or not. But more significantly, the call of the time is that you will have to now come up with strong regulation, at least for ensuring this kind of content on social media tends to, and specifically in the context of OTT, tends to be regulated. Just trying to get a Section 67 of the IT Act to get you down this kind of an OTT content will not suffice. Banning is a 19th century mindset to a 21st century problem. It just don't work. You will have to come up with more innovative thought processes. But yes, once some kind of issues come to your notice, you will have to take action. As a government, you can't say, look, I know, I've seen it, but I want to close my eyes. That's something that will be non-acceptable to people as such. So as and when instances like these come in, there will be legal consequences. But ultimately, let's join hands together in strengthening our children, that there's all this kind of content. Let's try to shield them, prepare them, empower them, that they are in a much better position to deal with these ground realities as and when they grow up.
I think there's just two things I want to end this with. One, there's a very big difference between regulation, censorship. Clear definitions are extremely important, and a robust understanding of what really functions in a system such as what we are talking about in the internet is hugely important. Government needs to be extremely sensitive to it, because anything beyond self-regulation may see a very strong backlash, and self-regulation, even with definitions, is hugely important to follow. Secondly, to parents, please ensure that you equip yourself and empower your children with all the safety mechanisms and the filters that are in place around you. Make yourselves aware about that. Anish Gawande, Uday Mahorkar, Satyam Surana, Pawan Dugal, Tehseen Poonawala, thank you very much for your perspectives. Very precious. Thank you.